The next thing we'll tackle is the background on the body. And this actually isn't a background image, though if we found one that looked like this, that would work just fine. But it's actually a gradient that CSS is adding for me. So in CSS, we can write linear gradients. And rather than writing them on our own from scratch, I'm going to show you a great resource that has some nice pre-done color gradients that we can work with, that we can update and edit on our own. So it's called uigradients.com, and then it has a bunch of different gradients. We can use arrow keys to see some of them. So I just went through until I found one that I liked. So let's say I wanted to use this. All that we need to do is click on Get CSS Code or hit the Enter key, and then copy this code to our clipboard. And then we'll select the body. So body, and paste that in. So it's really just one line, but there are all the different browser prefixes. So for Internet Explorer, for Firefox, for Chrome, for Opera, all these different prefixes. But what it does, we're setting the background to linear gradient, and we're picking two colors and different percentages of those colors, and also the angle. So let me show you what it looks like now. If we refresh ours, we have this nice gradient. So we can keep playing around there. We can check out a few more, and feel free to use your own. The one that I decided on is called Bora Bora, right here. So we'll just copy that, copy to clipboard, and replace this code, all of this here, with that new gradient, which again is just another linear gradient that someone else wrote, two colors, different percentages of each, and we'll save, and let's go check it out now. And there we go. So we're getting closer. The next big thing that we need to work on are the icons. So we have a plus icon up here, and what this does is it shows and hides the form, and then we have the trash can icons that we also need to include. Those icons are part of a library called Fonts Awesome. So I'll go to Font Awesome and just Google for it. The website is fontawesome.github.io, and all that it is a collection of a bunch of icons. So let me show you. If we look under icons, there's a huge list of all the different icons we can use. So you can see there. So we need to include this library inside of our application. So we can either go to download it right there and click on download, or we could also do a Font Awesome CDN and just use one of these CDNs as well. Either one would work. So for variety's sake, since I already downloaded jQuery, I will use the CDN here. Copy that link. Then I'll go to my index.html, and I need to add a link tag because it's a CSS file. So it's not actually a JavaScript file or a font, but it's a CSS file. And I'll save. And what that does is it actually gives me a bunch of classes that are pre-built and pre-made that I can then add to elements. So I'll show you a few examples. If we wanted to use, say, the battery empty or battery 3/4, all we need to know is that the class is called fa-battery-3-quarters. So we need to add, we'll just copy the code here, somewhere into our application. Let's put it in the H1. It's an I tag, which stands for icon, and then we give it a class. And we don't have to put anything in here. We leave that empty. And this stands for Font Awesome, and then this is the name of the icon. And we'll save, refresh, and we now have that battery icon. Rather than the 3/4 battery icon, we want the plus sign and the garbage can. So we'll go over here, and inside the H1, we'll keep the icon and keep the FA class, but we want FA-plus. And feel free to use your own icon if you go onto Font Awesome and you find another one that you like, because we could also use one of the like a pencil looking icon or a pencil and paper. And if I refresh, I now have the plus sign, which we'll need to style and move over to the right. And all we need to do for that is select it first. So we'll select dot FA-plus and we'll float it right. Just like that. And refresh, and it's now over on the right side. Now let's tackle the garbage cans. And we're not going to deal with the animation just yet. We're just going to get the garbage can to show up at all instead of an X. So let's go back, and on our spans, we're actually going to get rid of the X's, and inside the span, we're going to add another I tag, and the I tag is going to have a class of FA, and the name of the garbage can icon is FA-trash. Let's copy that over to the other spans, and this is only for the existing to-dos when the page loads, but we get 3 garbage cans. For the new ones, we're still dealing with the X. So then we'll want to go over here to our JavaScript, and when we append a new one, we don't want to append a span with X. We want to append an icon, and we need to make sure our quotes don't interfere. So we'll use single quotes there, and save. And now we should have a trash can icon inside of the span. So let's add a few new ones. There we go. And I can still click because they're still inside of a span. So it's an icon element inside of a span. So our click events still work. Now let's work on this simple animation. And this is all done with CSS. The spans here are actually hidden when the page loads. They have a width of 0. And then when I hover, we're actually increasing their width to 40 pixels. And then we're making it animated using the transition property. So let's go attempt some of that. Open up our CSS file, and the first thing we'll do is style spans. So span, and we're going to give them a background color, that red color, which is E74C3C. And we'll refresh. And now we have that red background around it. Next thing we'll do is give them a height of 40 pixels, which doesn't seem to do much yet, but once we add in a few more properties, you'll notice a difference. Let's add a margin to the right of 20 pixels and go back. And now that gives us the space that we wanted here. Next, let's give them text align center, which is just a very slight difference on the spans here, the icons inside. An important one is to make the icons white, so color white. All right, so I'm going to show you how to get them to look like this first without the animation so that they're always there, and then we'll get them to animate so that they're hidden until we hover. So we're getting close, but we need these to take up more space vertically and horizontally. So I'm going to add in a width of 40 pixels that eventually we're going to set to 0, and I'm going to set display to inline block. And I refresh now, and that looks just right. So the next thing is to do the animation. And the way that that works, we're actually going to set the width to be 0. So all of these spans have a width of 0 until I hover over an LI, and then we increase the width to be 40 on that span. So let's do that now. I'm going to set width to be 0. And then when we hover over an LI, so not just the span, but when we hover over an LI, we want to select the span that's inside of an LI that's being hovered over. Then we're going to set width to be 40 pixels, just like that. And let's go back to our own version and refresh. You can see that the spans are now gone. And when I hover over an LI, the span appears and the button works. So the next feature is getting it to animate so that it doesn't just appear instantly. And to do that, we'll just use the transition property. So on the span, we're going to add transition 0.2 seconds, and we'll make it linear, which just refers to the easing, which means that it will move at a constant speed. And there we go. We have our nice animation. There is one small item that does bother me here, which is that the icon still shows even when the span is 0 pixels wide. So it's really hard to see, but watch the icon here. it's still there even when I'm not hovering over it. So what we'll do is just set the opacity on the span to be 0, and then set it to be 1 when we hover. So opacity 0, and then opacity 1.0 when we hover. And that should take care of it. So now we can't see the icons. There it is, and then it disappears, and it fades out as well, because the transition property is affecting everything. So let's make it 2.2 seconds, and I'll show you. Notice how it fades in and then fades out. So that's a very slow version, and we'll just do 0.2. There is one small annoying thing that we have left, which is if you look really closely here, I'll increase the size, there's a small gap between the input and then this list, the UL. But the gap goes away when I focus. They're now flush. And then when I am not focused, it comes back. So to fix that, we're going to add a small border that's invisible actually. It's not going to have a color, just a small border of RGBA 0000, which will just take up the same space as our border does when we're focused. So we'll go back and select the input, which we have here, and give it a border of 3 pixel solid RGBA 0000. So that will end up giving us an invisible border, but notice here, I'll refresh right now, that little gap goes away. So now not only is the border flush when we have it focused, but there's also a border that helps us make it flush that we don't actually see.